Okay, so you want to own a shopping mall? The fantasy is simple. You buy a giant building full of shops, and every month, checks arrive in the mail from shoe stores and pretzel stands and candle shops, all for the privilege of being inside your walls. You are a lord of commerce, and the rent is your tax. It feels like the ultimate passive asset, a real estate empire where the tenants do all the work and you just collect. And in a world where every other business is a chaotic scramble of risk, a mall seems like a fortress of calm, predictable cash flow. Then you discover that the fantasy is a lie. A mall is not a collection of stores. It is a piece of machinery built to convert foot traffic into a landlord's profit. And the owner does not just open the doors and wait for money to appear. The owner walks into a labyrinth of contracts, legal obligations, and financial pressure points that can turn a busy shopping center into a quiet disaster. To understand what you really own, you have to stop looking at the storefronts and start looking at the structure that holds them up. Because the economics of this business are not about what you own. They are about who you are forced to rely on. The first shock to the system is the lease. It is not a simple handshake. It is a 100-page legal document that defines the owner's relationship with every tenant. In the old world, a lease was a percentage lease, where the owner took a cut of the store's sales. That was a beautiful alignment of incentives. If the store did well, the owner did well. But over the decades, the power has shifted to the big national chains. The large anchor stores, the department stores, and the supermarkets, they have the leverage to sign what is called a triple net lease. This is the owner's cost pass-through mechanism. The tenant takes responsibility for the property tax, the building insurance, and the common area maintenance. It means the owner can shift a massive chunk of operating costs directly onto the tenant's ledger. But in exchange, the owner gives up the ability to participate in the upside of those big stores' sales. The owner becomes a landlord, not a partner. And the rent they collect from these anchors is often a fixed, low figure, negotiated in a world where the mall needed the department store more than the department store needed the mall. So where does the owner actually make money? The answer lies in the smaller spaces, the inline tenants. Here, the economics are reversed. A small boutique or a phone repair shop does not have the power to demand a triple net lease. The mall offers them the one thing they cannot create on their own: a steady stream of people walking by their door. In exchange for that foot traffic, the mall owner charges a base rent and, crucially, a percentage rent. The owner takes a cut of the sales generated inside that small box. This is the hidden engine of the business. The mall owner is not just a landlord. They are an investor in the tenant's performance. If the small tenant is a success, the owner takes a share of that success. If the small tenant fails, the owner is left with a dark, empty space. And this is where the story gets dangerous. The math only works if the space is occupied. A dark store is not just a missing rent check. It is a black hole in the ecosystem. It stops the foot traffic that the other tenants rely on. This is the central fragility of the business model. It is a complex web of mutual dependence. The owner needs the big anchor to draw the crowd, and the small stores need the crowd to survive, and the owner needs the small stores to pay percentage rent to actually generate a decent return. The owner's entire profit is tied to the success of a chaotic collection of small business owners who are, more often than not, teetering on the edge of failure. The owner is not a passive collector. They are a high-stakes gambler on the sales of candle merchants and smoothie makers. You are betting your asset on the performance of a business that could be wiped out by a single rainy week. But even if every store is packed, you have to look at the cost structure to understand the pressure. The most dangerous cost in a shopping mall is not the electricity bill, though that is brutal. It is the capital expenditure, or CapEx. The building is a physical asset, and it decays. A mall owner must constantly spend money to keep the asset attractive. This is not a discretionary cost, it is a survival cost. If the carpets look old and the lighting is dim, the premium tenants will leave. If you do not spend the money to replace the roof, you will lose the heating, and the store owners will face a breach of contract that damages your entire balance sheet. So the owner is constantly writing checks to maintain a theater that must look like it never ages. This is the trap of the asset. The rent you collect is partially an illusion, because a percentage of it must be immediately reinvested just to stop the value of the building from falling. The business is a machine that consumes its own cash flow just to stand still. Then you discover the legal framework. The mall does not exist in a vacuum. It is a set of legal permissions. The most critical of these is the restrictive covenant. This is the clause in the anchor tenant's lease that gives them a veto over who else can set up shop in the mall. If you are the owner of a struggling regional mall and you want to rent out a space to a discount retailer to fill a gap, the anchor department store can simply say no. They will argue that a discount retailer cheapens their brand and detracts from their image. This is the law protecting the economics of the powerful, and it is a wall around your revenue. You cannot fill your space with the tenant who will pay the most rent. You can only fill it with the tenant the big guys allow. This is how one of the richest companies in America, like the operator of a luxury brand, can dictate the entire economics of a 500,000 square foot building. The owner owns the building, but the tenant owns the strategy. This leads to the risk that can destroy the asset faster than a fire. It is called anchor drag. When an anchor store in a weak mall goes bankrupt and closes, it is not just a loss of one tenant. It is the collapse of the entire premise of the mall. The foot traffic dries up. The smaller tenants, who were already paying high rents, no longer have the sales to cover their percentage rent. They begin to close. As the mall empties, the covenants in the remaining leases trigger. Many of those leases are tied to the occupancy rate of the mall. If occupancy drops below a certain threshold, say 80%, the tenant has a legal right to pay a reduced rent or even break the lease entirely. The owner is now in a death spiral. A single empty anchor store can trigger a cascade that wipes out half the owner's revenue and destroys the asset's value by as much as 70% in a single quarter. The business is not recession-proof. It is a highly leveraged bet on the illusion of permanence. And yet, despite all of this, serious, institutional capital fights to own these assets. Why? Because when the business works, it is a form of financial alchemy. The owner is taking a plot of land, a concrete shell, and a set of contracts, and turning them into a reliable stream of cash. A mall in a dominant location, controlled by a sophisticated operator, is a piece of infrastructure that is almost impossible to replicate. You cannot just buy a piece of land and build a new mall anymore. The zoning laws, the environmental reviews, and the sheer cost of construction make the cost of entry prohibitive. The land is scarce, the permits are rare, and the scale is immense. This creates a barrier to entry that protects the owner from competition. The owner of a prime mall is not just a landlord. They are the gatekeeper of a vital piece of real estate that the community depends on. For the billion-dollar investors, the private equity firms, and the pension funds, the appeal is not the profit margin, it is the leverage. A property like this is a perfect collateral asset. You can borrow against it at very low interest rates because the banks consider it a safe, hard asset. This allows the owner to use very little of their own money to control a massive enterprise. They buy the mall with a small down payment and a giant mortgage, and they use the tenant rent checks to pay off the bank. If inflation rises, the mall's value and the rent on the smaller stores rise with it, while the debt payments remain fixed. In an inflationary environment, this is a winning hand. The owner is paying off long-term debt with money that is worth less and less each year, while collecting rent on an asset that is becoming more valuable. The risk of the tenant's failure is a real danger, but the strategic reward of holding an irreplaceable piece of land in a good location is a lure that capital cannot ignore. So what is the business really? It is not a real estate play. It is a relationship and leverage play. You are buying a set of relationships with a department store, a shoe store, and a pretzel stand, all of which are bound by 1,000 pages of legal clauses. You are buying the right to demand a percentage of their profits in exchange for the crowd you bring them. You are buying a physical box that requires millions of dollars in upkeep just to prevent it from rotting. The economics of owning a shopping mall are the economics of managing fragility, balancing the power of your tenants, and praying that the anchor store does not close. It is a sophisticated, high-wire act, where the wire is made of contracts and the net is made of bank loans. And the thing that makes it beautiful is the same thing that makes it terrifying. It is a business where the owner's wealth is tied directly to the success of people they cannot control, in a world where the only guarantee is that the roof will eventually need to be replaced.